What's up guys, welcome back. Another day, another vlog. So I've decided to go back to filming in linear. I just was not feeling the old super wide any longer. Not feeling it anymore. But anyway, today gonna be working on Zach's motor a little bit more. Zach was meant to be coming out today, but he ended up staying in Brisbane. He's got some other stuff he's got to do or something, but obviously he's already been shown sort of bearing clearances and stuff, so I'm gonna go on with his big ends. I'm gonna finish those off, clearancing those, so that they're done for when he comes back. So I'll do the big ends, and then I'm thinking I'll probably just start getting his head back together, because he doesn't particularly need to be here for that. He's seen all of the important things, which is the grinding and lapping of the valves. As far as putting the actual head back together, putting the valves and springs and stuff back in the head, not a huge deal, not a big thing that he really needs to be here for. And also because of the way that the locks and colts sit so far down in the lifter bores, it's a really time consuming pain in the ass process of actually getting that head back together. So figure I'd be better off just doing it that way. It's pretty much back together for when he gets here. Like, I'll wait for him to put the cams and stuff back in and do the bottom end and put the head on the motor. So that may be tomorrow if he comes out. But yeah, I had yesterday off. Actually, I had to go to the hospital and do dad things for an appointment and that. So yesterday while I was gone, Rex has been working on the 31. So Matt, who's bought the 31 off us, he's got this idea, he wants to put it on the street. So we've had to take a fair bit of stuff out of it. You can see by how much less aggressive it is at the moment. We've taken out the roll center correction kit, which is, you know, awesome, except for the fact that the R34 rack ends and tie rod ends are not the correct length for running the front end without the extra track width. So now we've got to try and find another solution for tie rod ends and rack ends that's going to work with this setup without the extra track in it, track width. So lucky for us, we've got Zach's 33 here, it's outside, it's got no engine in it, which means it's very easy for us to pop the bonnet and go and measure the actual rack and tie rod end out of that to see if it's any shorter than the R34, because if it is, then we'll have to look into switching over to R33 rack ends, tie rod ends. I know that the 33 and the S14 should work, so I'm assuming that the 33 should be a little bit narrower than the 34, so I'm hoping that that's going to get us out of trouble. But you know, we've got a bit more work to do on this car. Probably not going to film much of it because you already saw it happening. It's not that exciting to just go and try and get it roadworthy. It's a pain in the ass. It is what it is. And then later on we might chuck the Deadly Rodeo up on the dyno just to see what it's doing. I wouldn't mind just having a look, but well, we don't know. Like, we played with that pump a little bit. We turned up the fuel a bit just to get it going a bit better, and it has been going a bit better. But ever since, it's obviously been sucking air somewhere in the diesel system, which makes it a real bitch to start. So it's not loving starting on cold starts and stuff now, because it must be sucking air somewhere in the diesel system. So we don't know how much more we want to mess with it until we sort that out, but it would be interesting just to run it up and see what it's doing. So we'll see what we get to today, but that's pretty much my plan. And yeah, I'd like to get a bit more of this engine together, and I really want to get Zach's motor together in the car, finished and going. And then we can start on our LS31. Righto guys, so we have a bit of a think about it over brekkie, and we've decided, because this R34 rack is just weeping from both sides, Rex has done some research. He can't source like a full, just a seal kit, a rebuild kit for it. I know I've had the similar issues with like S13 racks and stuff. So the only way to really rebuild it is to pull it down, get all the seals out, and just go to a seal shop and just buy all the seals you need individually, which is a massive pain in the ass. So given that this rack has that bit of an issue, obviously that's not good for a street car, that makes it unroadworthy. And the fact that the rack's been changed, and honestly, as far as putting the car on the street, it makes it a pain in the ass, because then if whoever ends up with a car, man, I've been in a position where they have to buy something and it's just all pieced together, different cars, it makes it a nightmare. So we've got the silhouette rack, or the steering rack out of the silhouette, and Rex still has the tie rod ends that he was using in this car before we rebuilt it, which are obviously probably N14 or something like that, to suit the S13 sort of knuckles. So what we're going to do is just swap out the steering rack again for a stock one. Like you saw, we didn't have to modify anything on the cross member to fit the R34 rack, so it's ready to just accept the R31 rack once again, and the N14 tie rod ends and rack ends, S13 tie rod ends. But that way it just makes the car pretty standard, you know, S13 fronted R31 that is easy to find information on and easy to get parts for, and is going to solve our issues that we're having with this issue of you know, the rack not being quite centered, having to find shorter tie rod ends, and just, it's becoming too complicated, especially for a car that's meant to be on the street. And that being said, if it's going to be sort of a street car, it doesn't necessarily need the R34 rack. So we're thinking about swapping the 31 rack back in. That just solves sort of all our problems with one Swift hit, and then we might chuck the 34 rack in the LS drift car. might be a way to go, seeing as we've got the lines and everything there, and the LS drift car will be that extended lower control arm, so it has the extra track width to make it work. So
it still leaks though.
It still leaks, but for a track car, it's not a big deal for us. The other thing is the LS power steering pumps are a higher pressure, so we probably generally find that it's going to keep destroying racks anyway, unless we do something with the vanes in the power steering pump. Get it rebuilt for lower pressure, or put a regulator in the hard line or something. I wonder if you can do that. I wonder if you can put a regulator in. That's it. Ideas, man, you see? Anyway, I suppose if you put a regulator in it, it'd probably just pop the pump.
Yeah, all you can do is put some sort of restrictor in it, but that's only going to restrict flow, not necessarily pressure.
Yeah. Oh well. Anyway, all things to look into. But regardless, yeah, if we can get that rack out and it's not leaking and make it work, it's going to solve all our issues. So saves us a massive headache at this time. So that's what we're going to look at doing. Lucky for us, also the Silo doesn't have a motor in it, which means it's also very easy to get the steering rack out of that. So it's just as easy to do that.
You're just going to flip it.
Yeah.
Alright, I need a 13 mil. 12.
Alrighty, so it's been a bit of a mission, but we got the rack out of the silo here, and Rex, we had to go and find his old rack and his old lines and everything, which are pretty hard to locate, but Rex is cleaning up his old rack ends and tie rod ends now, and so hopefully they'll go into the rack out of the silo, everything will bolt straight in. Fingers crossed that this rack doesn't have any leaks. Fingers crossed. There's no way we can really know because we never had the silo running, we've never had fluid running through that rack, so we're just really hoping it's not leaky, because that would very much make us very angry. But anyway, Rex is cleaning them up, so he's going to get working on that. While he's doing that, I'll go and start on Zach's big ends. So we'll report back on this little venture soon. Rightio guys, so starting to start these big ends, doing the big end bearing clearances. We've got these gauges now to actually measure inside the big ends, which I didn't have the other day. So can actually now do Zach's big ends. Like I said, Zach saw how we do bearing clearances. I don't think it particularly needs to be here for me to do these big ends, so I'll do them now. Just to get it out of the way. It's one less time consuming thing we have to do when he does get here. So literally the same process as the mains you watched the other day. Get the mic, I'll mic up the main journal and the crank, do a couple of measurements, make sure it's not out of round. I will then use this. You use this to measure the internal measurement of the big end and the rod, and you then mic this and get a measurement from the mic. And same thing where I'll do up and down, and I'll do 45 each way just to ensure that it's still nice and round. Log and record what all our clearances are. So I won't go into filming the whole process again because you've already seen it. It's probably pretty boring by this point, especially a lot of you who have watched my channel for a long time. I've done this a number of times, this walkthrough. So if you are interested, go back and watch a few older videos on my channel. You'll find some there about how to do bearing clearances. Yeah, I'm gonna run through this and we'll report back and we'll see how we go. I'll let you know what they were looking like. Gotta find the book where I was recording everything. Ah, it's up there. It's all good, all good. Sorry guys, just thought I would throw in as well. You would have seen the other day when we did all the mains and Zach was here, I actually have already gone down and torqued all the rod caps. This is very important when doing your measurements because this will change the measurements, having your rod caps actually torqued. It does change the roundness and everything of the rod, so all of your bearing clearances need to be done with everything torqued to spec or almost to spec. The rods are what we call, I suppose, a torque to yield boat or an angle torque setting. So they are 15 Newton meters or 15 foot-pounds, whatever it was, plus 60 degrees. The only real accurate way that you should be doing rod bolts is with a stretch gauge. I didn't do them with a stretch gauge just to do bearing clearances, but when we put the bottom end together, I'll do it with an actual stretch gauge. So this measures how much stretch actually is in the bolt. And the idea is that you should have enough stretch in the bolt that it keeps constant tension, but keeps elasticity. If you get too much stretch in the bolt, what you get in metallurgy is what we call elastic deformation and plastic deformation. So if you get too much stretch in the bolt, you start going from your elastic deformation into plastic deformation, which is a deformation of the bolt which lowers its strength and it never comes back. If you keep it in enough stretch that it's still an elastic deformation, it's going to keep that spring tension always on the bolt and keep it nice and strong. and that's how you measure it with a stretch gauge. So we'll go through that when we put the bottom end together. But anyway, for now, they're all ready to go for me to do the big end, so I'm going to do that. Righto guys, so hell of a long process, a real pain in the ass, but we are done. We've done all the big ends. I actually managed to do the thrust bearing in the main as well, which we actually can't get to with our ball gauge because it doesn't go that deep into the block. The gauge is too close to the actual measuring end, so the gauge hits the front main before you can actually do the center main. It's just one of the side effects of having a complete like main girdle with your caps integrated on the RBs. Just means you can't do that with our ball gauge, but because of those little gauges, I was actually managed to get one in there and do some measurements. So I was able to do that main, which is awesome. That came up at 2 thou as well. So all our measurements for the mains are pretty much between 1.5 to 2 thou, which is awesome. All of our measurement for our big ends are between sort of 1 and 2 thou as well, which is pretty good. Our biggest was number 3, which is that ring in. The one that we rung in for Zach. It's the biggest at 2 thou, which is a little bit on the big side, but it's certainly not going to sort of hurt it too much. And the smallest we've got is number 1, which is just over 1 thou, so a little bit tight. Honestly, 2 thou is probably more on the money. 2 thou is probably closer to being what I would like to see. 1 thou is a little bit tight, but I'm not that worried about it. It just means it's going to be pretty good oil pressure. Not only that, because it's a standard non-ground crank and standard size bearings, there's actually not really anything we could do except for pull the bearing shields out and widen them up. So if it were like a really sort of high budget, high horsepower build, what you can do is go through, you can see some are bigger than others on the rods. So what you can actually do is go through and swap some bearing shells around the same way we sort of did our rings when we got our rings. You know, if you've got some rings that are tight and some rings that are too big, you can actually swap them around and sort of find out which works best in what position, and then go from there. So that is something you can do with the bearings, because they can be, you know, we are talking we're talking in thousandths of an inch, which is tiny. That is 0.025 millimeters. So these are tiny, tiny, tiny increments we're talking about. Tiny measurements, very, very precise. But obviously when you're building engines, that's the aim of the game, is you have to be precision. It is all very precise work. So anyway, that is all the mains. Sorry, all of the bearing clearance is done now, and all our rings are gapped up. If you did miss that the other day, so we got our top rings all at 18 thou. Our second rings are all gapped at around 20 thou. And I checked a couple of oil rings, and I reckon they're going to be fine. They got between 10 and 15 thou clearance as well. So we are pretty much ready to start rocking this bottom end assembly now. As I said before, I shall take you through when I put it together. Actually doing the rod bolts with the stretch gauge. We use obviously fastener lubricant. The reason for that is it prevents scatter. Scatter is if the fastener nut or something gets caught up on the actual surface of the rod, or if there's something in the thread that it gets caught up, and it creates a bit of an issue. So it's very important to use fastener lubricant to prevent scatter, and yeah, we'll go through that when we start putting it together. So apart from that, we're good to go. The other thing we also use is lots and lots of engine assembly lube, because obviously on first startup it can take a little while for the oil to sort of get up and get everywhere and get to your bearings. So you never want them to be dry. So we use plenty of assembly lube on these things when we put them together. But anyway, as I was saying at the start of this video, I may look at moving on to this head this afternoon, just because it's a real pain to put back together, and it's not really something I don't think Zach particularly needs to be here for. The fact that all the ring gap and all the bearings clearances are done, if I can have that head together, or at least all the valves and springs and collets and everything together, it should mean that we should be able to get, you know, the crank, the rods, like the crank, the pistons and rods, everything together in the bottom end, and get the head on the motor with the cams in. That should all be able to happen in one day. So if we can make that happen, that'll be awesome. So I'll go check out what Rex is up to, and we'll check back in, see if we can get started on this head. So Rex has got the 31 steering rack back in now. Just started it up, just filling it up with fluids. Fingers crossed, no leaks. I think it'll be right, but anyway, he had about as much fun as I did, and it took him about as long. So 2 very, very time-consuming, pain in the ass jobs. But you get that.
Still got heaps of log.
Yeah, still plenty of log.
That's all the way to the log stop, so.
Yep. Still heaps. Just not quite as aggressive, but
It's not going to matter with the new owner.
means you're sort of off those guards a bit too.
Yeah, they've got heaps of clearance now.
Yep. Cool. Much more street friendly. Righto guys, so just getting started on Zach's head here. I've installed his new valve stem seals on the exhaust side here. So I'll go ahead and chuck back in his shims for the springs for the exhaust side. I've just kept them with the valves that they corresponded to, so they all go back in the same, because I didn't really want to change any installed heights or anything. These ones, because we ground the seats, the installed height might be a little bit different, but obviously, again, being stock, I'm just not that worried about that sort of thing for this motor at this stage. So the shims can go back in, then we'll chuck back in our springs, valves obviously, and springs, and see how we go trying to get these freaking locks on them. Great fun. Righto guys, so I managed to get all the exhaust valves done. So the exhaust side is done, valves are in, everything's locked up, back together. Massive pain in the ass. Anyone who's done RB25 heads, I'm sure, can sympathise. Just, again, it's just because the way the retainer is so far down in the lifter bore, just makes them such a pain in the ass. So that was me and Rex, and it's taken us like a good couple of hours. So you've got to be very patient to do this sort of stuff. So still gonna do the intakes. I'll do them tomorrow. It's getting late, I'm gonna head home now. So I told Zach instead of tomorrow, we're gonna do Thursday for Zach. So that's good. That gives Zach a chance. He's got to go to MSA and grab a few things for me. Or for him, just a bit of heat sleeving for that oil return for this rear head drain. So a bit of heat sleeving there, just because it's on the hot side, it's right near the manifold, so just a little bit of heat protection will be really good for that. So we'll get him to grab some of that from MSA tomorrow. I'll come here, I've got a few things to do tomorrow, a few things to do around here, so that's why I told Zach not to come tomorrow. And hopefully in the afternoon I'll get a chance to run through this head and finish off all the intake side. So that's the plan. I'm going to go on with that tomorrow, so that'll be in the next one, or I don't know, I might put a filler in, I don't know what's going on. We'll see. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, as always, and we'll be back very soon with some more RB25 content for Zach's build here. So smash like, smash subscribe, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace guys.